Well, good morning. I have too much to say, not enough time to say it. First slide, please. No passage, there we go. You know, there's, I think, 5 different times where Jesus says, do not think. I think we're taking that a little too literally sometimes, but he says, do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Now, when we join the Cheshire Community Church, and most Bible-believing churches, there's some sort of statement that says, you know, we believe the Bible, both the Old and New Testament, to be the inspired Word of God. And that's what we have in common. If we're a member here, we believe in the Bible. But some things in the Bible are kind of difficult. And I want to talk about a couple of those things today. And I'm hoping that you'll go away with just a basic understanding. And I'll tell you in a bit here what I want you to go away with. I'm going to give you a bunch of information. It's really not stuff that you probably use in everyday life unless you're talking to somebody that says, what about this? The Bible is wrong, or the Bible contradicts itself. I want to give you some information that maybe would be helpful to you in discussing something like that with people. They're out there, they're online, they're in the places where you work. So first I want to talk about the idea of Torah. Torah is translated in the Bible, in the New Testament. It's translated, in English, it's translated law almost exclusively. But the definition of Torah is a little bit different from our understanding of what law is, in that it means target. So if you're a marksman or an archer, or it's the thing that we're supposed to be shooting at. And there are so many different kinds of laws that I want to mention to you today, and I want you to understand the difference between the different kinds of law and the different kinds of situations in which these laws were written. The second definition is Torah, and it means the law of Moses. When it says the law of Moses, it's meaning Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible. And Jesus calls these things the Torah of Moses. It says in the Torah of Moses, or in the law of Moses, or sometimes it just says in Moses, when it's referring to the original understanding of Judaism, where it came from, and where we came from as children of God, and so forth. And so when it says in Moses, well, we would say, well, did Moses write all of it? And the answer has to be no, because in the writings of Moses, it records the death of Moses, and I don't think he came back and recorded his own death in the end of Deuteronomy. And so we understand in that sense, Torah is a compilation of things. And so if you get that, some editor at some point put those things together in those 5 books. That's not just in the books of Moses. That's also true of the book of Isaiah. It's also true of the book of Jeremiah. It's also true of the Gospels, where editors have taken the things and put them together into, in this case, 5 books, or in their case, the Sadducees would say that this is their Bible. This is the only Bible. And if it can't be proven in Moses, then it can't be proven. And so that was the difference between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Sadducees said, no, just these 5 books, just Moses, just Torah. And then the Pharisees said, no, but we also have the history of the King David and the prophets and all these other inspired writings. And so that was the difference between the two. So if I said to you, what does law mean in the New Testament? It means a target to shoot for. And in the New Testament, the word for sin, guess what that means? Missing the target. And so that's when we say sin, what people don't necessarily understand what the Bible is talking about when it says sin. Sin is when you don't hit the target properly. Maybe you've shot for it and missed it, or maybe you haven't even taken a shot, but that's what sin is, the understanding of law and sin. Next slide. Now there's actually 5. I'm only going to mention 4 of these. There are on this slide 4 Old Testaments. Well, we say we have the Old Testament, and when we say we have the Old Testament, we literally don't mean we have the Old Testament. We mean we have a book that records things that happened under the Old Covenant. Testament and covenant are the same word. So we have here listed 4 covenants that God made with people. Now, is it okay if I make separate deals with different people? Suppose I sell widgets, and I will sell widgets to you for $5, but I make a better deal with somebody else, and I agree to sell widgets to them for $7. What's a widget? Is it? A widget is anything you want to think about. It could be a pencil, it could be a car, whatever. You can make different deals with different people, and the Bible teaches that God has made different deals with different people. Now, the first covenant, or the first testament, is the one that God made with Adam and Eve. Now, Adam means man or mankind. And what is the covenant? The covenant is, a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, the two shall become one flesh, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. That's covenant number 1. That applies to everybody because the Bible teaches that these are the initial people, and the covenant is made with them, and therefore the covenant goes to every single descendant from those people. This is a precept. If you want to know biblical concepts, you have to have a precept. The underlying principle is that God has created us in his image and made us male and female and called us to fill the earth. Are you with me? So, time passes, and God gets really angry with the people because they're breaking that covenant, and people become wicked, and it says people's thoughts became only wicked continually, and God was upset with the earth, and he decided to destroy the earth, but he looked down and he saw Noah, and it says Noah looked up and he saw God, and Noah found grace in the eyes of God. Now, this is important because Noah was saved by grace, but not by keeping any law. He was okay with God because he had faith in God, and he accepted the grace of God. And therefore, when the world was destroyed, the only people who were left on the earth are the 3 sons of Noah and their wives. And God again says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. But there were some other conditions. Now, here's where it gets dicey in the New Testament. After this, after some time, God looks down and he sees this guy, Abram, and God said to Abram, if you believe in me, and I will make your descendants like the sand of the seashore, like the stars of the sky. And it says, and Abraham believed in the Lord, and God reckoned it to him as righteousness. So he's saved by his belief in the Lord, and his righteousness comes as a reckoning from God. And God said to Abraham, your descendants, in order to prove that you're in the covenant, you have to circumcise your children. Well, that's not a very popular thing today. But because the descendants of Abraham, which are not just the Jews, but also the Arabs, and Abraham would circumcise his children. That was the sign of the covenant that they have the right to live in the land from the Euphrates River to the sea. You know, they're saying from the river to the sea, they're saying, well, we want the Muslims to have from the Jordan River to the sea, but the covenant of the circumcision was made with this particular man and his descendants, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. You following me? So in the New Testament times, they said, well, if you want to be a Christian, you have to be circumcised. And they got together and said, no, that's not what the Bible says. Only the people who are descended from Abraham have to be circumcised. So after a lot of time passes, 400 or more years pass, then we come to the time of Moses. And Moses is given all kinds of laws. 634 laws the Jews are supposed to keep. And some of them, kosher laws, what you can eat, what you can do on the Sabbath, what you can't do. I mean, there's all kinds of things in the law of Moses. And from the beginning of Judaism up to the New Testament, the Jews at both times, and the Christians at the New Testament, have said the other people don't have to follow these 637 laws. God gave us, speaking as an Israelite, he gave us these laws. These laws are not binding upon Gentiles, or what is translated the heathen or the nations. So if we understand that God has made a different deal with Adam and Noah, in that those laws have to do with everybody, and he's made a different deal with Abraham, and the circumcision only has to do with Jews and Arabs, and if we understand that these other laws have to do only with Israel, then we can come to some understanding. Now, that is a basis, but I want to talk to you, I want to add to those things so that we can see where we're going. Are there any questions on that before I move on? Okay, next slide. Genesis 9:1. I mentioned this last week. God blessed Noah and his sons and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Okay? Reinstitution of the covenant with Adam and Eve. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they're given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. As I gave the green plant. You see, they were vegetarians before that. Only you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is its blood. We talked about that last week. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it. From every man's neighbor I will require it. The way it is said by Jesus and Moses, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You are responsible for the lives of those who are around you. And the reason for this, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. So this is the covenant of Noah. Now, on the other hand, we have Leviticus, says, speak to the sons of Israel. This has to do with the sons of Israel, not with everybody. Are you following me? These are the creatures which you may eat from all the animals which are on the earth. Whatever divides the hoof, thus making split hoofs, and chews the cud among the animals that you may eat. You are not to eat those which chew the cud, or those which divide the hoof. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not divide the hoof. It's unclean. Okay. To Israel, there are certain laws given. Now, I can say that it's very beneficial to eat only the kosher animals. What are the kosher animals? They're deer. They are cows, buffaloes, goats, sheep. The animal, they're vegetarians, all of them. They chew the cud. They're ruminants. They have the multiple stomachs, and they don't eat any dead things. And so it's safer to eat those foods. However, God gave pigs and all kinds of other things to the world at large to eat as they would see fit. So if somebody says to you, well, you believe all the Bible, why aren't you eating kosher? Or why do you worship on Sunday instead of Saturday? Or if they come against you with some of these kind of things, some of these kind of questions, you can say to them, sir, you don't understand the situation. We have here laws that are over centuries in different times and places, and we have covenants which apply to certain people but not to us. And you can explain it, because the people that criticize, number one, they don't know what I'm telling you right now. They just look at it and they want to use it as to condemn you or to condemn the Bible or something like that. Are there questions on this? So it's two different deals, two different covenants. Next slide, please. Now, some categories of the law of Israel. There's the moral law, right and wrong, that's not debatable. Never right to worship a false god, never right to take God's name in vain, never right to blaspheme God, never right to murder, never right to be covetous. I mean, those things are moral laws, and it's not right to be a liar. Those are way different from kosher eating laws, because these are moral laws. And I'll show you how the moral laws fit into what the church prayed about and came to in the book of Acts here in a little bit. So in these books, in Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus, we have differing kinds of laws. We have moral laws, which are brought in, and then we have religious law. So who can be the priest? And what does the priest have to wear? And how does the priest have to wash? And all of these things, how does the priest make the sacrifice? And we have all of these laws about Levitical priests. And remember, we have this book in the first 5 books of Moses called Leviticus, which means the priests, the descendants of Levi. So we have all these laws about how the sacrifices, what constitutes a whole burnt offering, what constitutes a sin offering, what constitutes a trespass offering or free will offering or peace offering, all these offerings that they made. There's religious law concerning those things. Well, we don't have Levitical priests anymore. We have a better priest. We have a priest that doesn't die. We have an eternal priest. But these religious laws are there for us to look at, but they're not there. If somebody says, well, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? There it is in the Bible. You believe the Bible, right? You say you believe the Bible. Well, why aren't you doing this? It doesn't have anything to do with us. There is no temple. There are no Levitical priests. Then we have, which is maybe not understood as well, is the secular law. Let me get a cough drop here. Yeah, I got 10 minutes to cover about 2 semesters of thought. Let me just say there is secular law, and the compilers of these books, they've taken the moral law and they've taken the religious law, they've taken the secular law, and they've stuck them together in these 5 books. Yes? That better? Okay. Now let's talk about the Hammurabi Code. You ever hear of that? They found this stone in 1901. And on the stone is written in the Babylonian language a whole bunch of laws that were instituted in the Middle East under the king Hammurabi. And they didn't have this to compare, but after 1901, they discovered that the biblical law, in many cases, takes the Hammurabi law and mercifies it. For instance, if you stole something, Hammurabi would say, cut the right hand off. Biblical law says, no, if you catch somebody stealing something, first of all, you have to prove it in a court of law, and you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It requires 2 or 3 witnesses. And if they're found guilty, if they stole something, just an ordinary something, an ordinary widget, Sean, whatever it is, the fine is fourfold. If the widget is worth $25, the fine is $100. But if they're found guilty of stealing something that has to do with a person's livelihood, suppose the widget is a hammer for a carpenter, then they would look at the value of the hammer and it would be multiplied by 5. So instead of cutting somebody's hand off, which Hammurabi would say, then the fine would be 5 times. So it takes laws that they already had on the books in the culture where they were living, and it mitigates. You know what I mean by mitigate? It means that it makes it so that it's not as bad. So if I'm renting an apartment to somebody and I have a lease for a year and they move out in the middle of the lease, I can't take them to court and say, I want all 6 months that they owe me because they have a year lease. No, I would be responsible to mitigate, which means I would have to find somebody to rent it, and then they only owe me between when they left and defaulted, and if I miss a month, then they would owe me that month. So they mitigate the damages. Watch Judge Judy, she'll explain it to you. So that's what some of the laws do. So here's a list. Next slide. King's mentions these. This is not an exhaustive list. Please understand, I'm giving you information that has, nuances, and there's more to say about everything about this. Commandments are non-optional moral law. Ordinances are laws relating to a time and place. We have an ordinance in the town of Canandaigua, a building ordinance. You can build here as long as it's X number of feet from the property line. It has to have a setback of X number of feet, and the septic system has to be so far from the well or water supply, and we've got all these laws. Those laws are ordinances. They have no effect whatsoever on the city of Canandaigua. They have their own ordinances. So there are a difference between the laws in the Old Testament between commandments and ordinances. Ordinances are for a particular time and place. Then we have a statute, which is a type of law, which is the legal definition of a crime and punishment rules handed down after litigation. So there is, our laws are based on this. There is first-degree premeditated murder, and there's second-degree murder. There's criminally negligent homicide. There's manslaughter. And there's all these types of statutes are found in the book of Deuteronomy and in the book of Numbers and in the book of Exodus. And so a statute would be, what is the legal definition of a particular crime, and what would the punishment be, 3 to 5 years or whatever, that the judge has some leeway. Those are statutes. They don't have anything to do with the 21st century. Some of them, they really don't. A person guilty of murder under these laws, the statute would say stoning is the punishment. We don't have that. They didn't have that in the New Testament. They brought the woman to Jesus who was an adulteress, and they said, we caught her in the very act. We got the 2 or 3 witnesses. The law says you should kill her. What do you say? And Jesus grabbed the second part of the law, which they didn't remember, and he said, okay, the law says that if you're going to testify against an adulteress or against a murderer, the witnesses have to throw the first stones. That's what it says in Moses. And when they heard that, they said, okay, I guess we didn't get Jesus after all, because we certainly don't want to kill this lady for what she did. I mean, that's what was happening in the New Testament. So law is a place and time thing. And then the fourth type, there are more than this, but the fourth type are testimonies. And these are like the Passover and Pentecost and Tabernacles as they did their holidays and stuff. The Passover talked about how God removed them from slavery using blood on the doorposts, and the death angel passed over. And then Pentecost is the beginning of the harvest. So Pentecost comes the 50 days after Passover, and the harvest begins, and the Holy Spirit is poured out on the day of Pentecost, and the harvest is beginning. And then at the end of the year, you have to live in tents. And remember that you used to be a wandering Bedouin on the earth, but now you have your permanent home. And so the idea of heaven is in these testimonies. So they might say, well, why don't you live in a tent at the end of the year? Well, it's not given to Gentiles to live in a tent, but it certainly would be. Can you imagine what would happen if we put a big tent up out here and stayed outside for a week? People would notice it, I guarantee it. So this is greatly simplified, but it gives you an idea. And if you understand that there are all kinds of different laws, and they were at different times in different places, and an editor brought them together in these books, then it's easier to understand it. Next slide. Let's talk about Deuteronomy. I'm going to keep you long today, sorry. Deuteronomy comes from the Greek word Deuteronomy. Okay, never mind. It means second law. This term is derived from the Greek deuteros, which means second, and nomos means law. Now, the children of Israel, according to the scriptures, they came out of Egypt, and they went to through the sea, and they came into the place where into the promised land, and the law was given. The 10 Commandments were given in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and all the laws were given. And then after 40 years, they wandered in the wilderness, and they finally did get into the promised land, but things had changed, and so some of the laws had to be reinterpreted, because if you're living as a Bedouin in the field, and then you come into a place with homes and villages and all that stuff, some of these things have to be looked at again. And here's a couple of examples. I mentioned this last week. Here's the first law. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall go out as a free man without payment. If he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall go out with him. This is a mitigation from Hammurabi. Hammurabi would say, no, the guy can go, but the wife has to stay. After all of that time passed and they went into the promised land, there was this law, which adds mercy to it. If your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years. The 7th, you shall set him free. And when you set him free, you shall not send him away empty-handed. You shall furnish him liberally from your flock and from your threshing floor and from your wine vat. You shall give him as the Lord your God has blessed you. And you shall remember you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord redeemed you. Therefore I command you to this today. So initially, the question came up, what do I do about these slaves? Can I keep a slave forever? The statute says no, you have to let him go. in the 7th year. But then as time passed, they got to thinking, well, that's not very nice. Send somebody out with nothing. No, you got to provide for that guy according to your blessing. He needs to live in the same way as you live. And so it's a change towards mercy. So I think we need to understand these things as Christians. Next slide, please. Acts 15. They had this big argument. Do Gentiles have to circumcise their children, and do they need to be instructed in the laws of Moses? Big church fight. The Judaizers are saying, yeah, they have to be. Conversion experience wouldn't. How many men would join up to join the church if they had to go in for a surgical procedure on their manhood? Would there be any evangelism at all? It'd be a church filled with women. Do we need to instruct them to keep the law of Moses? These are the questions in the book of Acts. And they came to this conclusion. Known from long ago, okay, the decision is based on an understanding that is long ago. We should not trouble those Gentiles who are turning to God, but we should write to them to abstain from things polluted by idols. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. You shall not blaspheme the name of God. You shall honor God's day. So we should instruct them to do that. And from fornication, which is any kind of sexual sin outside of heterosexual marriage. Includes incest and all these other things. And from whatever has been strangled, and from blood. You have to take care of your animals so that they don't suffer, and if you're going to eat them, they should die painlessly. And you shall abstain from blood, which means you shall not hate your neighbor and kill your neighbor, but you are responsible for your neighbor because God will demand the neighbor's blood at your hand. Now here's what the Jews say. In Judaism, the 7 laws of Noah, otherwise referred to as the Noahide laws, are set universal moral laws, which according to the Talmud, which is Jewish writing, were given by God as a covenant with Noah, with the sons of Noah, that is, all humanity. The 7 laws of Noah include prohibitions against worshiping idols, cursing God, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, and eating flesh torn from a living animal, as well as the obligation to establish the courts of justice. And so when the church was deciding these issues, what they did is they went back to the covenant of Noah and said, okay, Christians need to follow these things because they are in the covenant with Adam and in the covenant with Noah, which apply to all of the human race. They're not responsible to these other things about what we eat, how far we can walk on the Sabbath and all that kind of thing. There's been a teaching in the church, a false teaching, called antinomianism. Ever hear of it? Antinomian means against the law or in opposition to the law. Remember the first scripture I showed you? It said, Jesus said, "Do not think I came to abolish the law. I did not come to abolish it, but to do it, to fulfill it." And Paul says in Ephesians, he's talking about the relationship between Gentile Christians and Jews. He himself, that is Jesus, is our peace, who made both groups into one and broke down the barrier and the dividing wall by abolishing in his flesh the enmity, the strife and the problem, which is the law of commandments contained in ordinances, not the moral law, the things that separate the Jews. Okay, you shall not cut the corner of your beard. And you see these Hasidic Jews with the big curls. Those are ordinances. Those are for that particular people at that particular time. These are ordinances. These are not moral laws. So that he himself, that is Jesus, might make the two into one new man, thus establishing peace between Jew and Gentile, and might reconcile them both into one body to God through the cross, by having put to death the enmity. Questions or discussions? Got to make it quick because we're going to take communion today. This is our lesson on the genre of law. Literally could be a teaching that goes for months in a.
So Jesus would say that the Jews have to obey all of Abrahamic laws through today, or are they freed after Jesus? I guess you can admit
That's the question for Jews. Some Jews would say, yes, we have to keep them, but then it becomes a problem in the church because, if you read the New Testament, the discussion was, well, what if somebody offers me food that's been sacrificed to an idol? And it's kind of an open question. Peter, he doesn't like Gentiles. And he goes, God says, go to, where was it that he went? Same place that Jonah went. And he gets there and he has this vision, and all these animals come down on a sheet, and God or an angel or somebody says, arise, Peter, kill and eat. And he says, no, I've never eaten any of that stuff. And happened 3 times. And Peter eventually comes to realize that this is not about food. This is about his relationship as an apostle with the Gentiles. And he's not going to win any Gentiles if he refuses to eat at their table. So these are like New Testament questions that are discussed in the book of Corinthians or whatever. How does this work out? And it doesn't work out easily. Thank you for the question, and I hope you're satisfied with the non-answer. Anyone else? I know somebody's got to have questions on this. This is deep stuff. This is not what you expected today when you came, I'm sure.
So Messianic Jews, you'd say, are probably freed from the laws of Moses, from the laws of Abraham, would you think? If they consider Christ as God, what do you think?
Could you rephrase the question?
In other words, a Jew who believes Jesus is God, is he freed from the laws of Abraham and, free?
I wouldn't think so. Wait for the mic, because we got people online.
I had friends who were Messianic Jews when I was in high school, and they said they were free from the law because of Christ's sacrifice, but they chose to follow it out of tradition and out of adhering to their Jewish faith.
There you have it. I think there would be, some people would say, and Jews today, for the most part, are just, they're like the most, like cultural Christians, they're Christmas and Easter type, many of them. And they go to the high holidays, but they eat whatever you want. My friend Henry was raised pretty well. I think he was conservative, but, they, as a kid, he never ate anything that wasn't kosher, but, I've spotted him eating shrimp over at the fire department. And he says he prayed over it, so he's good. So it'd be a difference of opinion between different ones. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to very quickly take communion. That'd be all right? You don't have to get anywhere, do you? It's probably raining out. Okay, I'm going to wash my hands. Before I do that, please subscribe if you're listening online.